Welcome everyone to BoomerWorks. We are delighted to have you here for our Franchise Ownership 101 session led by Heather Rosen, who is the queen of franchises. Heather and I have known each other for many years, and she's been doing franchises for the last decade plus and has so much information to share with you guys. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Heather, and she is just going to really kind of pour into you about all things franchise related. So Heather, take it away.
Okay, happy to be here this evening. Well, welcome to a program that I actually have been doing for quite some time, although I sort of combined a couple of programs that I do because I wanted to make sure that everybody on this webinar really understood franchises, which is something that I don't always cover. So this is really going to be a true 101 course. Let me post my contact information in here too, so that you know how to contact me with other questions. Also in there, you're going to see a link to an evaluation form that I hope you'll fill out, because it'll allow you to give me feedback on this new presentation, but also it's a way to ask questions that you don't want to put into the chat. Also a way to request a copy of the slides. And you're going to be seeing, if you haven't already, a short version of an assessment form that will give you a result if you're wondering if this is something that you should put time into. So that will be also provided to you, but the one thing we ask is that you fill out the evaluation so that we know where to send it to. So my background, I've been doing this work for a little more than 11 years. My first job was as a lawyer. I was a business lawyer for about 7 years. And then I switched over to the corporate side of legal services. I was a leader of a department that helped the firm grow and do more business. I used to work with division leaders, they call them practice leaders in legal services, and would help them figure out how to get more strategic clients and also do more cross-marketing and just grow their practice generally within the context of this very large law firm. And in 2008, during the last recession, the work that I was doing, which was a lot of fun and had really manageable hours, changed dramatically because of the recession. The function of our department changed. I lost a lot of people because of layoffs in the firm. And it wasn't the same job. It wasn't fun. And the hours went completely crazy. So I started to do some research. Fortunately, I was telling Michael and Shira, my father is a business person who left practicing law as well. And so I had this role model, and I knew that it was possible for somebody who, was trying to use the skills that they developed in the corporate world to open up a business. I knew that I had a good role model for doing that. So I left that life and actually went into business doing what I'm doing now, also through a franchise. The company that I'm with is called FranNet. It is we're very well regarded in the franchise space. We're really considered to be leaders and have a really good grasp of what's going on in the industry. So for me, coming into this business with the ability to do things like to teach, to do research, to advise, which is what I had done as a lawyer and I had done with the lawyers in the firm. I wanted to continue to do that, but I didn't know the industry. And so I kind of partnered with this company called FranNet that did know the industry, and to this day continues to feed me current information about franchises, who's doing well, who's not doing well, which franchises are having a leadership change. And of the franchises that are doing well, who's doing well in them? Because just because a franchise does well with a lot of people doesn't mean that you or I could step into that franchise and do well. All of them require a different skill set. They all make a different amount of money. They all have a different time requirement, and there's a lot more to it. So I needed access to current data on that, and that's why I still work through them. And what I also liked is, and this is sort of a lesson too in franchising, is people will say to you, well, in order to have your own business, you have to be able to sell. Well, that's not true. I'm an advisor. In fact, I don't charge for my services. The franchises look at me as almost like a headhunter or recruiter. So I get paid even though my client never pays anything. And for me, that's how it had to be, because I'm not a salesperson. I don't come from that background. And so for me, the way I was going to go into business was as an advisor. So here's what I'm going to cover today. First and foremost, I'm going to talk about how to figure out if franchising is right for you. And actually, we have somebody on the webinar who is about to go into business through a franchise, who I think was at one point questioning whether franchising is right for her. And I'm going to ask her to say a couple words in a little bit. But it's really important. It can be a great business. It has been for me, but I've also seen people fail, and I don't want that to happen to you. I'm going to talk about why people sometimes fail as franchise owners, and then also cover trends in the industry. I'll talk about this concept of semi-absentee businesses. This might be something that you've heard about at some point. You really want to understand what that term means so that you know how to investigate them. Also, I'm going to hopefully get you to start thinking about these businesses like you would think about any other investment. A franchise is going to be your job because you're going to be the CEO of this new company, but you're putting money into it too. And so you also want to think through things like, risk and return on investment. And these are things that a lot of people going into business or a franchise, they just don't think about it until they're already in there. And then they say, wait a minute, I could have made more money from this investment if I did something else, or saved money and not spend as much money. Oftentimes this answer is yes, but they didn't know how to research franchises, so they didn't know that there were those options. I'm going to talk about how to simplify the search, because there are thousands of businesses out there. And then I'll talk about what franchises cost, the different cost categories, and how people pay for them. And in the meantime, I'm going to be monitoring, or trying to monitor, the chat box. So if you have questions, please throw them in there. That should be in your toolbar. So there are three main ways to go into business. You can start up on your own. You could buy somebody else out, and franchises can be bought and sold just like any other business. The only difference is you also have a contract with a franchise company that gets conveyed to the new owner of the business. Or you can start a new location of an existing franchise. Three main ways. I don't cover multi-level marketing simply because my focus as an advisor for people looking to get into business has always been helping people create a business that will support them. And typically speaking, in multi-level marketing, I know there are some exceptions. Typically speaking, people in multi-level marketing aren't doing that. It's mostly, people who are just looking to make a little side money. And there aren't that many examples of people who have really been able to live off of the income. And it's kind of set up to be that way. There's no commitment, no cost of entry. So what I'm talking about today is building a business that can support you. And I want to back up and talk about what is a franchise, because a lot of people hear this term and they think fast food. This is what most people typically think of when they think of a franchise. But I've already given you an example of my business, which is obviously not a fast food business. So how is my business a franchise? Well, a franchise is just what you have as a company that works in headquarters office somewhere. Of course, right now they're probably all working from home, but generally speaking, you have a group of people who are employed to support franchisees. And when you join a franchise, they teach you how to run the business and give you a license to use all of their intelligence and also their intellectual property. So you're going to get to use their logos, any patents that they might have, any PowerPoints that you'll see at the bottom of my PowerPoint right here. There's a logo from Frannet. This is a slide that Frannet created some version of. I got this from them. So they give you a business system in addition to intellectual property that you use during the course of business. And the idea is to help you do things a proven way and also look more professional. What they get for that, they don't just do that out of the kindness of their heart. They get money. There's an initial franchise fee that you pay to them for all of the help, all of the training that they're going to give you, not just initial training, but ongoing training until you really know what you're doing. And then you're going to pay a royalty for ongoing help from other people in the corporate office. You're going to have people who have different functions that deliver services to you and the other franchisees. So you can see, what do you get for the franchise fee and the royalties? You get a working system and support that if you follow the system, you will do well if you put the time into researching to make sure this is really a franchise that does well. You should look for a family atmosphere. You should feel like an owner. There are some franchises where people say, I just feel like, an employee again. I'm just doing one function. That might be okay for some people, but most people who get into business are looking to really feel like a business owner, to feel like they can make at least some decisions about their business. And you should be looking for a way to build wealth. As I said, it's still an investment. You're putting money in, and it should be something that outperforms, for example, the stock market. Otherwise, why would you put your money into this business, right? And for people, of course, who have been laid off, they're looking to never have to go through that again. So this is the question about, when a franchise makes sense. So it really just depends on your situation. Basically, startup businesses on your own, independent businesses without a franchise, are perfect for the kind of people that I used to work with, which are lawyers, practice group leaders. They already knew how to run a business. So if they were going to hang out their own shingle and go into business as a lawyer, they wouldn't need a franchise because they know how to bill, they know how to charge people, they already know what software to use, they know what kind of space they need to run their practice, all the things that they need to know to do correctly in order to be profitable. But most people don't go into business that way. Most people, either they have performed just one function of a business, maybe they were some sort of a technical consultant, but they weren't on the sales side, or they worked in a restaurant and they were a cook, but they don't know how to run a restaurant profitably. And what happens is if you don't know how to run the business because you've never done it before, you're going to make mistakes. Most people make mistakes, which is okay for some amount of time. At some point, if you keep making mistakes and you keep losing money or not making a lot of money, you're going to have to close the business. So startups are great if you already know how to run the business. If you have a long learning curve because you don't know how to run the business profitably, that's when you start to see statistics about people who start businesses in 5 years, half of them are already closed because it just takes too long to fix all the problems and really get it right. And if you go to the bank in order to borrow money to open up your business, the bank knows these statistics. And they're not going to allow you to take out money because they know that your chances of success are really low. So this is something to think about if you're thinking about going out on your own. Really consider, have I run this as a business profitably before? And if not, do I have enough time to fix all the problems? Do I need the income from my business right away? Or can I wait 8, 9, 10 years, which is, these are real numbers. When I went around the seminars that I've done in the past and asked people, how long did it take you to turn your business into a profitable venture, and they did it on their own, I would hear a minimum of 9 or 10 years. So that's how you sort of would consider this option. Buying somebody else out could be another option. But again, you're best positioned to do this if you already have run the business before. Why? Because somebody who is ready to sell you their business is not going to tell you about the problem. So it doesn't mean that you can't just buy an existing business that you've never run before. It just means there's a lot more that you're going to have to do to make sure that this business is not wrought with problems. And because you don't want to inherit somebody's problems, right? So everybody, likes the fact with an existing business that you can see how much money it makes. Certainly if you go to the bank, for a loan, they want to see some historical results too. People like the idea that it's an existing location, customers, maybe a customer list at least, that you already have some employees in place. And sometimes the owner will even help you buy the business by giving you a note. But the disadvantage is that it's really hard to figure out what the true cash flow is. Business owners, myself included, do write off a lot of stuff against the business. It's not like getting a paycheck. We will deduct all kinds of things legally, hopefully legally, but I can speak for myself. Accountants are notorious at saying, here's all the things that you should do before the end of the year. Why? Because we're trying to minimize our tax liability. We don't have a big board of directors. We don't have a board of directors to impress. So the only thing we care about is minimizing tax liability. So we're going to make our income look really, really small on our tax returns. Well, you go and buy my business, I'm going to say, here's how much money my business makes every year. And you're going to be really confused because you're going to look at my tax returns and say, well, I hear you, but your tax returns say you only made this. And then I'm going to show you all the things that I wrote off voluntarily against my business. It still might be really confusing to really piece that back together. Sometimes, is it a necessary expense or not? If you don't write off, if I didn't write off my car, do I actually have to buy a car for my business? That's just one example. The other thing is when you buy somebody's business, one of the things you're paying for is something called goodwill. And goodwill is really the probability that my customers as a seller are going to come to you. How do you know that my customers are going to come to you? I present you with a client list. How do you know if any of those people are coming back? There are a lot of reasons somebody might be on a client list or a customer list. They might have bought a Groupon, for example. Or I might be somebody that they're willing to work with. They came to me, but they might not come to you because they don't know you. And they have some less expensive options, right? We see this all the time during COVID, people supporting businesses that are not, they're not always their favorite restaurant, but they really want to help out the family because they've been in their town forever. That restaurant owner sells the restaurant. I think a lot of those customers aren't coming back. So just an example of some of the stuff that goes on. Employees leave, of course. And when people sell their businesses, most of the time, not all the time, of course, but most of the time, there is a reason other than I've just done this long enough. Usually when people sell their business, there's some pain there and they're looking to cash out and get out of the business. So you really have to dive in. And that's why I say, when you've already run a business like this, you know what questions to ask. But as somebody who's coming into that industry for the first time, you might not. Also, you might have an additional cost. So the seller of a business may have been netting $50,000 a year, which may have been okay, but you're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to try to grow this business. That person may not have had any debt. You might have to borrow money from the bank to pay for the business, and now you have this additional expense, loan service to the bank. And owners are not always great teachers. Even if they're successful, they're not always great at teaching people. Small businesses very rarely have an operations manual. And owners are they just don't always remember everything. It's not that they're trying to not tell you things, but they just don't remember the details. And eventually they're going to be on to the next phase of their life. And, it's going to be hard to track them down to get a question answered. So franchises, as I said, can be bought and sold too. And a lot of these things are also true for franchises. I had 3 clients last year who bought existing businesses. One of them at the beginning of COVID bought a cash flow positive business for $725,000. It was a painting franchise that started out, I think he paid $120,000 for the business. But the other two bought franchise locations of a good franchise, but the owner was struggling. So we found more of those cash flow positive businesses at the beginning of the pandemic, where the owner was just didn't want to fight their way through another pandemic. At this point, there aren't a lot of those. So you want to look extra carefully at any kind of a business that's being offered to you for sale. There's probably a reason, and you have to figure out what needs to be fixed, and if you have the money, the skills, and the time to fix those problems. I think that's all I want to say about this slide. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. The difference between this and a franchise, franchises can be bought and sold too, is that when you investigate somebody's franchise for sale, it's a little easier to figure out what's going on, because you talk to not just the people who are selling, but you talk to other people. You actually talk to existing franchisees who own other locations. And you also talk to the corporate office, which is hoping, they want you to succeed. They want you to actually get into this business and do well, because remember, they're going to make money from you as a franchisee. So you'll learn a lot more about what's really going on as a franchise. And the other difference is that the training in a franchise comes from the franchise itself. It doesn't come from the seller. So now I want to talk about a franchise. But before I do that, we have somebody on, as I mentioned before, Cindy, who is going to become a franchisee very soon if she hasn't already. And I thought I would, if you can give us just a 2-minute recap of kind of how you happen upon a franchise and what you are planning to do.
Right. Thank you, Heather. I have started 2 businesses from scratch in the past. So over the last 28 years, I've started 2 businesses, and as Heather discussed, when you start from scratch, you have to build that business. You have to put together the operations, the operations manual, everything that goes into building a business. And this time, my focus was, I didn't want to spend a lot of time setting up the operation. What I wanted to do is be able to take my experience and go out and help clients. And so the franchise that I'm purchasing is in business coaching and training. And so, and the reason that was attractive to me is that I'm really purchasing the content, 78 different training programs, a methodology, operations, the back-end support. And so it really made sense when I sat down and I looked at, starting a coaching and training practice from scratch versus going into an already proven model. And, another big thing was I was able to do diligence. So I was able to speak to the existing coaches. What makes you successful? What makes you not successful? I was also, because of their disclosures, also able to speak with coaches that had left. And why did they fail? And, so trying to get a feel for what was going on there. And then I created a questionnaire for each coach, because I wanted to get consistent answers about, what were the advantages, what were the disadvantages, what do they wish they had known before they went into the franchising model. And so did a lot of that work. And then what I did was I met with all of the executive officers. So it was very important that I met with the executive officers of the corporation. I also reviewed their financials, had questions, so that, I could just get a feel for, okay, what's going on here. In addition, I had my corporate attorney review the franchisor disclosure document, I guess FDD.
Yes.
The franchise agreement, I did go back and have them make some amendments. And so, it was, and I think I had that knowledge because I had owned, having owned businesses and started them from scratch, that really helped get a start. But what the franchise is doing for me now is it's giving me that leg up. So I'm not going to have to recreate the wheel. And so I'm very excited. Either way, you're going to put in a lot of work. It just depends on where you're going to put that work in. And so in this case, my decision was to go with a proven model that I could get my business, up and running quicker than I would if I had to go and create 78 training modules myself. It just didn't make sense.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cindy. I appreciate all of that.
Yeah.
Sharing your journey. So what you've heard is a couple of things. You've heard about a system that you get as part of a franchise, a whole business system, not just here's who to go to for marketing, not just a website, which you do get, but a whole system, a whole bunch of modules or curriculum in Cindy's case, but in other cases, there's always more. They spell out the entire way to run the business successfully, and they know this because they've already made the mistakes for you. Now, in a younger business, they've made less mistakes. And sometimes that's too young. But for some people, they actually like the franchise to feel more like a partnership. And so they like the younger businesses as long as the franchisor is an experienced franchisor. Picture going into business with Ray Kroc, the guy who franchised McDonald's. Even if he was opening up a shoe shine business, you'd say, but he's Ray Kroc. He knows how to build a successful franchise. So sometimes people do that as well. So, and the other thing you heard is about evidence. And this is what really drew me to franchising as a former business lawyer. You can find out, it's not a guess as to whether these businesses work or not. If you know what you're doing, you can figure out if they work or not, and beyond that, who they work for. Talking to franchisees allows you to talk to people who came from a variety of different backgrounds, and you can look for the person who is the most closely aligned to your background and find out how those people did in this particular franchise, because everybody's different. So before I go into all of the other great things, I want to tell you who it's not for, because I don't want you to fail in franchising. First of all, it's not for people who don't love following rules. You have to be somewhat of a system follower. The younger franchises are going to have less rules, but they'll still have some rules. And so as you look back on your professional history and you think about people who you've worked for, who you feel like you've admired, but you don't like when they tell you to do things differently, that could be an indication that this might not be the right way for you. You don't want to go into a franchise if you think you're going to be, resisting change, because the franchisor, their motivation, financial motivation, is to get the franchisees to make more money. And if you don't like change, if you don't like, doing things a way that you didn't think of yourself, you might feel frustrated in a franchise system. So you have to be a system follower to be successful. There are going to be some limited choices. If you're in a restaurant franchise, you're not going to be able to add a menu item. But even in a consulting franchise, there are probably some things that you can't consult on. You're going to be limited. All of the franchisees are going to appear to do the same thing through the franchisor website, and that means that you can't go off and do your own thing under their brand name. There are going to usually be annual sales goals, and that's because most franchises award exclusive territory to operate that business. And with exclusivity are always caveats. Exclusivity clauses say things like, you are going to be the only one who has the rights to run this business in this part of the country. But we expect your business to make at least this much per year. And the reason they have that, again, is because of the royalties. The royalties are usually based off of the gross sales of the franchise. So if your gross sales are low, they're making less money. Now, what happens if you start off slow? They usually understand that. The problem is if it's 5 years into it and you're not even close to those numbers in your contract, that's where you're going to have a problem. And that's why you should have real motivation, a real hunger to make this happen. You shouldn't go into a franchise if you're just looking for something to do. I've had people over the years tell me, oh, I'm just bored, I want to do something different. I don't think that's the right person for franchise. Franchisees are people who are hungry. They really need to make money. They really need this to happen. There's a goal that they can only achieve if they go into business, and they're going to make it, they're going to try their best to make it happen. If that's the case, that's a good thing. And then you go talk to other people like that, and you ask them, how achievable are those sales goals? And in a good franchise, you'll hear, you should be able to do that with your eyes closed as long as you follow the system. But they're there. Another thing is sometimes people don't choose a franchise as a way to go into business because they think they're going to save a lot of money that they would have had to pay in franchise fees and royalties. So a franchise fee is a one-time fee that you pay when you join the franchise. It lasts for the term of your franchise contract. The franchise contract is renewable. But when you renew the contract, typically you don't pay the franchise fee again. Typically, it's just a much smaller renewal fee. The royalty is an ongoing fee, like I said, usually based on gross sales. In some cases, the royalty is a flat fee. In those cases, some franchises, they allow people to run them part-time. They don't really care how many hours you want to put into the business. So they'll just charge you a flat royalty, and you can decide how much you want to put into your business or not. But usually most franchises, it's a percentage of gross sales. So the franchise fee, what to do with this concept, because I get it. I didn't want to have to pay a franchise fee either. Think of it as a consulting fee. Think of it as a fee that if you went into a brand new business, and let's say you weren't investing just your money, but you were investing somebody else's money, maybe your parents' money or something like that. You have to get this right. You cannot lose this money. A lot of people will hire a consultant from the industry to get that business off the ground so that it doesn't make the mistakes. That's very similar to what people pay in a franchise fee. Another example is when people change careers, or people try to, they want to advance in their career. They will take a class, or they'll go for a degree in another area in order to be able to make that move. Also very similar to a franchise fee, and actually a franchise fee is usually a lot less than people pay for an MBA, for example. So that's the franchise fee. It's for all the training, all the hand-holding, all the time that they spend with you in order to make sure that, to do everything that they can to make sure that you succeed. The royalties are more similar to salaries for employees. You're going to be having people do work for you from the franchise office. The royalty pays their salary, also provides a little bit of a profit for the franchisor, but that's why you pay royalties. So when you're evaluating a franchise and you're saying, I'm not sure if I want to pay these fees, well, what if you had to hire somebody to do this work? How much would that cost? Usually the franchise fee and the royalty that you pay is actually less than the cost of hiring out these people if you had a business on your own. Protected territories, it's good and it's bad. If you're somebody who wants to take a business and grow it nationally and be the person in Fortune magazine known for this kind of thing, you're not going to do that through a franchise. Franchises, you're going to run in your own particular lane. It might be a really big lane. You might make a lot of money, but you're going to sort of give up the right to be the national representative of a company. It is a contract. So you can get out of a franchise contract. One way, of course, is to sell your business. You're not going to continue to be in a franchise contract after you sell it. But also, you can always negotiate your way out of a franchise contract. It might cost you some money. It really depends on what you can give to the franchisor as you exit. If there's something that you have that they want, you can probably negotiate your way out of a termination fee, but there could be a termination fee. But the point is, you're not locked in for life. You really can get out, and no franchisor really wants unhappy people there. Usually when somebody says, I'm really unhappy there, they really want to try to get you out of there because you're going to bring down the whole system. You're going to be, a downer. You're going to be using up a lot of their time complaining. They would rather have you go on and do something else. And the last point I want to make, something to think about, because people will ask me about this from time to time, is, well, why wouldn't I just, go with a really well-known fast food franchise? Isn't the best franchise a Subway or a McDonald's? Just remember that these, iconic, especially the food franchises, when something happens either with their leadership team or just with some franchisee somewhere else in the country, that stuff usually makes national news, and that could impact your business. People could stop going to you because somebody ate a bad tomato in Dubuque. So it's not always a no-brainer. I actually think that the sweet spot in franchising is finding a franchise that really knows what it's doing, but you can pick off the best territory near where you want to open up to business, and they fly a little bit under the radar, so that, again, if something happens to another franchisee, that doesn't hurt your business. On the plus side for a franchise, they're proven. You can usually start up quicker. I was telling Michael a little bit earlier, my typical person that I counsel on this, it's usually somebody who has great reasons for wanting to go into business, but they can't wait forever to make money. They really need to replace their salary. It's not going to probably happen in the first year, but it's got to be sooner rather than later. And the reason they can do that, it's not magic, it's because the franchise already knows what they're doing. So every move that they make, every decision, they make, every penny they spend on marketing or on an employee or on space is the right decision, versus you or I starting a business and we pick the wrong space, or we overpay for it, or we buy too much space. It's going to take us a lot longer. We're going to waste our money on something that a franchisee is not going to waste money on. All the support systems, as I said before, that's another thing that people like. Think about the operation side alone. Cindy going into a coaching franchise, she doesn't want to have to deal with cybersecurity hacks. She's a coach. She doesn't want to have to deal with procuring a website and making sure that it can be found on someone's Google search. She wants to deal with customers and clients and help them move to the next phase in their professional lives. So they are going to handle the tech stuff, the back end stuff that you have no interest in, while you work with your clients and you manage employees if you have employees. So these are more things to expect. Another thing about a franchise that I personally really like is having a bunch of peers. The people who I work with, I mean, I have some employees and contractors, but I mostly talk to other franchisees. These are people who are very much like me. I've got some great friendships now because of the franchise. And most importantly, when I have a problem, I call them up and say, how did you do it? How did you fix this? Or who do you know that I should be talking to? That's invaluable. To me, anyway. I found that to be just as valuable as the help I get from the corporate office. And then the last thing is the fact that they're regulated. As Cindy was saying, you get this document from them. It lists every single franchisee. It also lists any kind of trouble that the franchise might have gotten into, so you can see if there are any red flags there. Who are these people who run this business, and has this franchise ever been sued? You'll see that in the document. But you also have a full list of every franchisee. So when you're investigating this, you can contact them and you can find out how much people actually make and how many people make that amount of money and how quickly it takes people generally to break even. And like Cindy was saying, what does it take to be successful in this business? All of that is discoverable. This is all evidence that's right there that you get to see before you are asked to sign anything or write a check. So how to fail in franchising, what not to do. Okay, so don't let emotions or passion for a product or service be the main driver. This is a mistake that people make all the time. The product or service that you end up selling becomes secondary. It's important, but it becomes secondary to what you do as a business owner on a day-to-day basis. If you dislike the work of generating clients in your particular business, or you dislike the work of managing your employees, or you dislike the hours or anything else, you're going to fail. You're going to want to get out of that business. So don't let the first thing that you think about be you and what you're looking for. And I'm going to talk about this more later in the presentation. Um, Again, don't look for a franchise necessarily where you have industry experience. A lot of franchises won't even offer a franchise to somebody with industry experience. That might seem counterintuitive, but they find usually that they can train people better. People are more coachable when they don't feel like they already know something. They're going to be more open to coaching and training. Make sure you have enough working capital. The franchises will tell you how much the franchise fee is. The disclosure document that you get will tell you how much you need to be open for business. So it's going to be the franchise fee plus additional working capital. But you also have to know how much money you're going to need before you're going to break even, and make sure you have all of that money available to you to support you while you're trying to build your business. Don't pick a franchise that has too many rules for you particularly. This goes back to what I was saying before. You might be somewhat of a rule follower, but you might not want to be told what to do, when to show up to work, what to do in the morning, what to do in the afternoon, and what to do in the evening every day, which is a lot of times the way it is in the fast food franchises. Everybody says, those are the best franchises. I know that I wouldn't be happy in that environment. I would fail because I like more flexibility. I like more ability to try new things, to be creative. And a lot of people that I coach are actually looking for something a little bit more creative. They're willing to follow some sort of structure, but they want some choices as well. And of course, don't pay too much. And that might sound logical to you, but I see all the time people putting money into this really expensive business where it barely matches up to their skill set. They're really not making that much money. If they had put that same amount of money or less into a different business, they actually would have made more money. So even though you might, along the way find something that seems interesting, don't just investigate that business. I would still encourage you to go through the full search, look at all of your options, line it up, match it up with the one that you found, and see if you truly found the best deal. Most people find when they do that, when I've worked with them and they do that, that they really haven't, that they really missed something that was either less expensive, more profitable, more in line with their background. I've had clients talk about, when they went through the process of calling franchisees from different businesses, there was one business where they found people who were more like them, people who they've worked with, similar to people who they've worked with in the past. So, don't just go for the first thing that you find. Really take the time. It's going to be worth it for you in the end to take the time and look at all of your options before you make this very big decision. How much experience does the franchisor have? How simple is this going to be for you with your background to get up to speed on? What's your learning curve going to be like? Every franchise tells you that they will give you an initial training period. And sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 4. You really want to look for a franchise that has ongoing training. They should constantly be looking for ways to make franchisees more successful, more profitable, to help you get smarter at your business. Name recognition, I actually consider that a nice to have. I've seen very well-known franchisees in well-known franchises really struggle and not make money. I've also seen franchises with no local name recognition open up on day one, they've broken even because the franchise had a phenomenal grand opening program. It's actually not that difficult to create local name recognition in a franchise. Yes, national name recognition, it does take a lot of time and money, but you don't need national name recognition. You just need to be known in your territory. Look for a real sales team, a real marketing team, operations team. It shouldn't just be, one person in a rented office space. You should find that there are people, you're paying a royalty. You should be able to meet the people who are going to be working for you and hear from them what they're going to be doing for you that they already do for the other franchisees. And also look for this culture of teamwork, which, some franchises are really built that way where franchisees are helping people all the time. Some franchises don't have that. The territories really aren't carved that way. You have people stepping on each other's toes. You're going to be much happier in a franchise where you have franchisees helping each other. You're going to be smarter because you're going to learn from them, but you're also going to just enjoy being a franchise, part of that franchise family even more. So here are the 6 main categories in franchise ownership. And the categories that people know the least about are the last 2. Just because you can't see them. Some of these businesses are home-based, some of them are office-based, but they don't have a sign. A lot of the service businesses don't have a sign out front. The sign is going to be in advertising somewhere. It's not going to be in front of the store, because there is no store. It's in an office space or your home. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time. Hopefully you'll learn about some of these businesses that you might not have even thought of when you thought about a franchise. But what to look for in general: look for franchises that have that cater to people from one of the 2 or both of the largest demographic groups, those being baby boomers or millennials. If your product or service is something that baby boomers or millennials typically buy, that's a good sign. It doesn't mean you're going to succeed, but it really is going to help you a lot, because it's a big well of people. Some of the industries where we found that are health and wellness, handyman services, even cleaning services. And you might poo-poo this, but you wouldn't believe how many people buy these services, and they're good services. These are all services that really help people in different ways. Of course, essential services are great. I'm going to repost the evaluation form with the slide request, because I know some of you are trying to take notes here, and you don't need that. I will send you the slides. Just make sure to fill out the evaluation form. I will also, by the way, if you fill out the evaluation form, I will also send you the essays from the book that I co-authored called More Than Just Franchise. Available through Amazon, but I will send it to you for free if you complete the evaluation form for me. So essential services, anything that's essential is great. You would rather sell something that's needed than wanted, especially now. We've been talking about essential services since the beginning of the pandemic. But the truth is, I've been talking about essential services for years. It's always better to be a needed service. And here's some examples. And then businesses that are essential to other businesses. There are certain kinds of services that businesses buy all the time. Staffing services, equipment, you see them here. If you are a business that's marketing driven, you have to buy marketing. You're going to have to buy advertising. Every office space, every business that operates out of an office space uses a janitorial service. And I've talked about on other webinars some of the trends, and I don't have time to cover all of them, but one of them is janitorial services. In order for people to feel safe going back to an office, and for shoppers to feel safe going into any kind of a retail space, they're going to have a visual that the place is clean. And what that means is the janitorial service that they were already using is probably going to be coming more frequently, probably going to be showing up during the day, because it gives people peace of mind. There've already been articles written about how the high-end hotels are actually hiring, they're making, well, they have their own services, but they're making their cleaning staff show up. Usually the cleaning staff would be cleaning after everybody is asleep, at night. That's when they're cleaning the common areas. Now they have them showing up during the day, because it gives the customers peace of mind that the place is truly being continuously cleaned. That's what people need to see right now because of COVID. So that's a really great industry. The sister to that industry is air quality. Air quality is a huge issue right now in a lot of different businesses, including some of the public spaces, including places like schools, where the ventilation, a lot of the times the windows in the schools don't open, or there isn't a window, and people are panicking that the sick air is being circulated and people are going to get sick by being in the room. All of these businesses, by the way, if you haven't figured it out already, are businesses that have franchises that are delivering these types of services. Home office businesses are another trend right now. And here's some examples of some of the franchises that can be run out of a home office. And I'm not talking about you know, a Tupperware business. Nothing wrong with Tupperware. I own Tupperware, but these are businesses with employees. These are businesses with, there's just not an office space that you have to rent. It can be operated out of a home office. When the business gets bigger, sometimes you do have to rent office space, but in terms of your startup costs, you can start up a lot of these businesses for a fraction of what you can start a lot of the retail businesses for. So remember, you know, professionals in businesses always need training. Parents always want quality education for their kids. Younger kids, they like edutainment, where they can drop the kids off. The kids have fun, but they learn something. Those businesses do exceptionally well, and especially in this part of the country. You're always going to have people who need home repairs, the janitorial services that we talked about, and that staffing companies are very, very flexible, nimble. They can switch between industries. So when one staffing franchise, even if all of your clients were from the hospitality industry, they can switch on a dime. They're staffing businesses. They know how to recruit, and they can recruit in any industry. So anytime one industry sector goes down, staffing businesses switch. And think about how scalable these businesses are. As a staffing franchise, you make money from every single person who is out working, and you're not managing them. They're being managed by whatever company hired them, but you're getting a big chunk of their hourly rate. And if they're hired by the company, you're getting a placement fee for them. Very, very interesting, very lucrative business model. Some of the franchises are better than others. There's a couple franchises that I've placed a lot of people with. They're making a lot of money. So just think about, again, I'm trying to get you thinking about this like an investor would. How can you put the least amount of money into a business where you're happy and make the most amount of money? Now let's talk about semi-absentee ownership. And I think I've still got some time, right? We go until 6:45? Yeah. Okay. So semi-absentee ownership, you will hear this term if you investigate franchises. You will hear this term batted around a lot. I think every franchisor aspires to have a semi-absentee model, because what this means is technically it means that you can have another business, or you can have another job and run this business. A lot of franchises, most of them actually, are not semi-absentee, and they won't award you territory if they know that you have a job or another business. But think about how many more people a franchise can recruit if they say it's okay, you can have a job or another business. But beware, this term is used very, very loosely in our industry. Semi-absentee literally just means that the franchisor believes it's possible for you to have another business or to have a job. It could mean that they still think that you need to put at least 35 hours a week into the business. When people tend to think about part-time businesses or part-time jobs, they're usually thinking not 35 hours a week. They usually have less hours to put into the business. So just be careful about that term in the industry. You really want to figure out, mostly from talking to the franchisees, how many hours you really have to work, and make sure you can find franchisees that are truly running it semi-absentee and are successful. They're actually making enough money. So here are some of the categories where I've seen from semi-absentee franchises pop up. This is not to say that every nutrition or office suites franchise can be run semi-absentee. Some can and some can't. But here are just some of the categories where I've seen some that have true semi-absentee models. You're typically not going to find that in the food industry. Restaurant franchises are typically not only not semi-absentee, but they're typically 7 days a week, 12 to 14 plus hours a day. It's a lifestyle. Owning a restaurant is a lifestyle. So to say that a franchise can be run, a food franchise, restaurant franchise can be run semi-absentee, I wouldn't expect that unless you get to the point where you can, you have enough profit to pay a general manager to run them for you. Somebody has to be keeping their eye on the business if it's not you, and you're going to have to compensate that person with a pretty, with a decent salary. Home care businesses also, childcare businesses, it's too easy for something to go wrong when you have a business that's taking care of other people. So typically those businesses are not semi-absentee. So what to look for, how to lower your risk if you're looking at a franchise, you're thinking about going into business with a franchise. Look for signs that it's recession resistant. Maybe you can even talk to people who operated the business during the last recession or during the time that we've been in semi-lockdown. Sometimes the younger franchises actually, I've seen this happen a few times during this time of COVID. The younger franchises, in some cases, pivoted a lot quicker because they were already looking for new ways to do things. When franchises have been around for a long time, just like companies that have been around for a long time, they tend to change very infrequently and slowly. Some of the younger franchises actually are doing some interesting, innovative things that maybe the older franchises will do eventually. So recession resistant doesn't necessarily mean mature. You want to look for a mature industry, but some younger, experienced franchises might be the way to go, especially after we've seen what happened to some of the other companies during this time of COVID. But definitely look for something that's technology resistant, where what you sell is not something that people can get for free, or what a company can get for free on the internet. You don't want your services to not be something that people are willing to pay for. Look for a solid marketing program, ask franchisees about this, and an e-commerce strategy. The businesses that suffered the least during COVID, and some of them actually are doing better, by the way. It's not that they all suffered, but some of them definitely did suffer. But part of this is to be present online, to have an e-commerce strategy. If you are a business, I've even seen this with our local Dairy Queen. They never do any marketing. They never have. People just kept driving by the Dairy Queen. They have a fantastic location, but during this time of COVID, nobody was driving. So their business tanked, and they had to have a fundraiser in order to keep their lights on. You don't want that to be you. If nothing else, have a solid e-commerce strategy. Usually franchises will tell you, if you're a retail store, to also buy some marketing, some actual couponing, maybe some direct mail. But definitely look for, now that we've been through this period of COVID, definitely be looking for a solid e-commerce strategy from your franchise, and contingency plan. See what happened during COVID. See how quickly they pivoted to a business model that was effective during this unusual time. So here's another checklist for you. When you're evaluating a franchise, if you're trying to minimize risk and maximize your return on investment, make sure that you can prove that they have a track record of success. And a track record of success, how long does that need to be? That's really going to depend on you. It's going to depend on your risk tolerance level. Some people, all they need to do is talk to other successful people who bought into the company. But most people really want to talk to franchisees who have been with the company for a while, who could talk about how their franchise performed. So however much assurance you need, go and do the work, talk to franchisees, and try to prove that it's really as profitable as you would need it to be in order to really do this and be able to stay in your business. Make sure it can legally open up in your market. Virginia, Maryland, New York, Washington State, there are several other states that are registration states. What that means is there are a lot of franchises that can open in Washington, D.C., which is not a registration state, cannot open in Virginia or Maryland. You have to know that your franchise can open. And I would like to say that every franchise is really good about saying, no, we're not registered in the state, you can't open here, but they're not. A lot of them are, most of them are, but I've definitely had consultations with people who were about to sign on the dotted line for a franchise. And I said, you can't open in the state. We don't know. They say, well, the franchisor said that they're going to register, but they might not be able to register. They might not be approved. Our states do not approve every single franchise. So make sure it's registered and in good standing. Some businesses require a special kind of license, whether it's a franchise or not. Make sure you know that you, with your work history, because that's what they're usually looking for, a certain kind of experience. If you are going into one of those kinds of businesses, home care, for example, there's a special licensing procedure. Make sure that in your state, you can get that license. So, if you happen across somebody who is advising you on businesses and they know nothing about your state, look for somebody who knows something about your state. I consult with people. Sometimes they live around here and they want to move. I loop in my colleague to make sure that we do everything right and somebody doesn't end up with a business that they can't even open. Because the franchisor won't always give you your money back. So we don't want to get into that situation. Though the franchisor will say, well, you should have known that, but that doesn't help you. Make sure that there's not just available territory, but that you're happy with the territory. Just because you've heard of a franchise and they have a territory left, if that area is not a great territory, maybe look for a franchise that's a little bit younger that has the prime territory available. Your success in a franchise is going to be determined by which business you pick, but also the location that you pick. Even if it's not something that has a physical retail location, the territory that you choose absolutely matters. So don't just pick the leftovers of a franchise that everybody knows. That's a recipe for potential failure. Pick a product or service to sell that people or businesses need now and also into the foreseeable future. Avoid trendy things. We all know what trends are, yet every year I get questions about this food and that food, and we've never seen anything like this before. This is a trend on TikTok. Okay, it's okay to offer trendy things, but the businesses that will last are the businesses that also sell something that isn't trendy, that will make enough money alone even when that trend ends. So avoid trends and pick the right business for you. Your skill set and your interests and your time has to be in line with what the business owners, the other franchisees, are doing and what they're getting. It's got to be the right business for you. Just because you heard or you see that a business has been around for a long time doesn't mean it's going to be successful enough for you. There are numerous businesses where people are making less than $50,000 a year, which is fine for some people, but that wasn't going to be a choice for me. I wasn't going to be able to go into business and make $50,000 or less. I would have had to, if that was my only option, I would have had to keep my job. So make sure that all of the things lined up. Spend the time on the front end figuring out what the business would need to do in order for it to be a success for you personally. I talk about this concept of creating a business model, which is really just a checklist of all the things. This is how we filter down from all of the choices that we have to the one or the ones that are going to be the best fit for you. You create a business model. Think about your financial goals. How much money do you need to make in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5? Figure that out first before you start investigating businesses. How about your lifestyle goals? Do you want a business that is more mobile? Do you want a business that's home-based? Do you want a business, do you like retail? You might like certain stores, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be on a schedule every day where you go into a store at 7 and leave at 8. So think about your lifestyle goals, and really not just today. I mean, try to project into the future. Of course, we don't know exactly what the future holds for us, but think about where your life might be in 5 years, 10 years plus, when maybe your kids who are home with you now are in college, or maybe at that point you might have to be taking care of aging parents, or maybe you want to have a vacation house, or maybe you have a vacation house already and you want to be able to work from your vacation house. There are a lot of choices out there. There's so many franchises that it's worth it. It's going to be worth it to you to spend this time up front to model this and go look for this kind of best case scenario, because a lot of times it's out there. Also, you want to do a self reflection on your skills. There are different businesses. You don't have to sell to own a franchise, to run a successful franchise. You do have to have certain skills, but you don't have to sell. But there are different franchises for different people. People who love to sell, who love to cold call and network, they don't typically do well in retail franchises. There's just not enough control that they have over the sales pipeline, and they get really frustrated. You need to get them in front of people. But somebody who doesn't have that background, or maybe had to do it for a job but never really liked it, you don't put them in a franchise where they have to be cold calling and networking. You look at franchises where it's more marketing driven, where it's more teaching driven, where it's more interacting with customers and making sure customers are happy. Different franchises for different skill sets. So make sure that you're really clear about what your skill sets are, what you're really good at, and find a franchise. Again, you don't necessarily need the industry experience, but the skill sets have to match up with the skill sets of the people who are already successful in that franchise. Also, in terms of preferences, how about employees? How do you feel about having employees? Not everybody likes managing people. Some people are individual contributors, subject matter experts. They like consulting and advising. They don't love managing employees. A lot of us have had to do it in order to climb the corporate ladder, in order to get the bigger salary, but not everybody loves it. However, if you love it, you should find a franchise that is built to have employees, right? Because you're going to be missing that piece of your joy from your professional life if you don't have that, if you don't have the ability to help another person grow and succeed. So think about that. Also, there are different kinds of employees. So you might want to think about how you feel about managing. I mean, a lot of people that I talk to have, if they have had management roles, they have managed white collar, college educated, professional employees because of where we live. But in a franchise, you probably won't have that. You'll probably have hourly workers, entry-level people, maybe some skilled tradespeople. It's a different kind of employee. And you might not care. And that might excite you to be able to help people who are not your typical corporate ladder climbers succeed and get ahead. But not everybody likes that. I mean, sometimes people have experience with a certain kind of employee and they found that that was not enjoyable to them. So you want to use this knowledge of what you know about yourself to find a business that's going to give you a situation that is really much better than you could have ever imagined with any kind of job. Because a lot of times you can really do this. Certainly map out a budget. You want to have a do not exceed number in mind. I do not want to spend more than this amount of money. And I do not want to take out more than this amount in loans. I mean, you don't always need a loan, but sometimes you do. And you want to look within your budget. I mean, at some point, people will say, well, I just want to make this much money, so show me everything. I'm open to any budget. But I know I can always throw out a number that scares them. So think about, and if you don't, if you're married or have a significant other, you probably want to have this conversation with them is how much money do we want to put into this business project of ours that we're going to build for ourselves, just like you did with your house. How much money do we want to put in to a house? There wasn't an unlimited number. Think about yourself in different environments. Do you want to be working from home? Do you see yourself in a professional office space? How about retail? How about there's some franchises that are light manufacturing businesses, but that's a warehouse kind of environment. How do you feel about that? I mean, can you really see yourself? Sometimes people don't know, but sometimes they do. So at least think through these questions. How much time do you have to put into the business? Certainly. And if if it's a semi-absentee part-time business that you're looking for, what hours are you free? Because if you're just free from 10 p.m. to midnight, for most franchises, that's not going to be the right hours. You're going to need to have some working hours where you can interact with your manager at the minimum. There's no franchise that just is operated through an email exchange. There's always going to be some sort of interaction with somebody, if not your customer, then your employees. And then how many units do you really need? How many territories? Sometimes when you talk to consultants, they'll try to, get you to, want to buy a bigger area. You might not need that. I mean, you think about, you really want to start with how much money you need to make, and kind of back into it, then figure out how much territory you would need in order to make that kind of money. Also, there are franchises, if you have a number of, it's one thing to have multiple territories, it's another thing to have multiple offices or multiple locations. In order to do that successfully, you're going to have to be good at managing people that you can't see every day. And not everybody has that skill set. So take that into consideration and think about whether there's a particular type of customer that you really like working with, or you don't like working with. There are 3 categories that I run people through that, okay, thank you, that I ask them. I know people typically react to when I ask them about customers. So spend time talking to the owners of the businesses, okay? So you want to make sure that what they're doing and what they're getting is really what you're looking for. And you really want to spend the time talking to at least 6, if not 10 or more franchisees, not just the people who are doing well. Also talk to the people who are leaving or left or doing kind of average, and find out what's going on. Every franchise has people who failed, but you want to find out why they failed. And you want to obviously find a franchise where most people succeeded and didn't fail, but you're always going to have some failures. Here's another checklist to go through in terms of figuring out whether you've thought everything through. Finding something that you're going to enjoy. Why not? Life's too short, right? Make sure that it's not a fad, as I said. Look for some. It's okay to have competition. It's okay to be in an industry where there are competitors, but you should be able to identify a few strategic market advantages with your particular franchise. And make sure your family supports you. This is definitely a family decision. You could get into the best of franchises and your spouse or significant other is not in favor of you being in this business or any business. They really want you to go get a job, and you will likely end up getting a job and having to leave the franchise. I had one unfortunate situation where that happened. We talked to the spouse, but the spouse, sort of was nodding her head, said she was okay with it. But a month after he got into the business, she got nervous again. She made him leave the franchise and take a job. We don't want that to happen to you. It's going to spend no less than 2 months, probably more like 3 or 4 months, researching a franchise, go through all the steps. And there are professional advisors, as Cindy was saying. There are lawyers. You actually probably don't want to go to a corporate lawyer, though, because they don't typically know what they're looking for. Better to go to a franchise lawyer who's seen a number of franchise agreements in the past. You're going to spend a lot of time going through this. So if you're curious, fill out the evaluation form, take the initial assessment, see what comes up. There might not be something for you, but you can figure that out very easily if you go through this process. In terms of cost, home-based businesses are typically less than $100,000. I've placed people in businesses where the total investment was $60,000. And there's no correlation between what you can make and how much you pay to go into the business. So look at all of your options. Obviously, the franchises that have retail space, restaurants, the bigger spaces are going to cost more. It's going to cost more if you have to buy refrigerators, freezers, ovens rather, onions too maybe, or if you have to hire employees. you might not need that. It's not to, say anything bad about those businesses, but you might save a lot of money if you just go through this process and look at your options. So make sure to not just be impressed by the sales numbers. You want to know what the net profits are in these businesses, how much people are netting as franchisees in this business, and think about an exit strategy too. If not initially, sometimes people go into these businesses initially with a manager and they're semi-absentee, but also sometimes people, that's their exit strategy, is to start a business, put a lot of time into it now, but start grooming a manager to take over. And then they've got a part-time business that's a source of revenue for them up until the time that they want to sell it. Last major topic is how people typically pay for businesses. You might not know this. First of all, it is possible to use 401k or IRA funds. You don't liquidate it and you don't take a loan. You actually set up a new 401k through a company that becomes the 401k administrator. And it's a customized plan that allows you to buy stock in your own company. You can use that capital to start the business, to fund it. You can even pay yourself a salary from it. Sometimes people do that because they just bypass the whole bank loan process completely. The money's theirs. They put the money back into their own 401k as the company appreciates when they sell it. Another thing you could do other than a traditional bank loan is you could use, for a small enough business, you might be able to use a home equity line of credit. Why do I mention this? Why not just go get a business loan? Well, the money is often cheaper. Usually the interest rate is lower than a SBA guaranteed loan. Also, you don't have to go through the SBA process, which not only takes a long time, but you have to prepare a business plan with projections, get that approved, go through underwriting. There are some interesting SBA programs right now. I'm actually doing a webinar on Thursday with a funding expert on this. So throw your information into the evaluation form if you want to be on the mailing list for the funding webinar, which is also free, by the way. Interesting program right now that came about because of the CARES Act, because that's a stimulus type. It's a recovery, but it's also a stimulus bill. But a home equity line of credit, it's easier to get, it's cheaper. A lot of times people do that, they're funded a lot quicker than otherwise. And as I said, think about an exit strategy. These are things that we talk through all the time. I mean, this applies to a regular business as well, independent business, but with a franchise, I mean, you can prove whether this is something that can be run semi-absentee or not. So you know that your exit, you might have an exit strategy, but your exit strategy might not work. With a franchise, you can figure out whether it's possible to work that way or not, just by talking to other people. And then, sometimes people get into a business with their kids. They work in the business full-time for a couple of years. They work side by side with their adult child. And then the strategy is for the child to run the business after a couple of years. And that becomes a source of income for you because you're the investor into your later years. And of course, you can sell it. So generally speaking, when to start really searching for a business is when you are no more than 18 months from being at the point where you want to own this business, 18 months or less, committed to. I mean, you might not know what's out there. Most people who search, they don't know. I don't know if we're going to find something, but they're committed to making something happen if they find the right thing. So if you would like to see that happen within the next 18 months, start right now. You're going to have at least $50,000 liquid from somewhere. That could be from the rollover, the IRA or 401k. Sometimes people use home equity line of credit funds. I would prefer that you don't. And some franchises don't like that either. It makes them a little bit too nervous. But most people, they'll figure out a way to come up with that. That might be funds from friends or family, or you might just have it in your IRA or 401k. But that's going to be a minimum starting point for a franchise that is really going to have a chance of replacing or exceeding your last income or your current income. Always have some living expenses. This is a rule of thumb that you'll hear from SCORE and the small business development centers. It's always, even if you find out that people who own this franchise make money in the first month or two, that does happen sometimes. You don't want to be stressed about this. You want to go into business with a cushion, so that you can just focus on building your business the right way. You don't want to do anything out of desperation. Like I said, if you're married, definitely involve your spouse, or if you're in a committed relationship, in the initial conversation. They're going to have to be supportive of you as you go and build this. And then I really discourage against partnerships. I don't know if anyone else has talked about this, but I've seen so many situations where people get into a fantastic franchise with a partner. They've done a ton of research. Franchisees are doing great. They fail only because they and their partner disagree on all of the major points, or it takes them forever to reach a consensus on anything. You don't want that to happen. If you think you might need some more cash than you have, see if you can start the business on your own and then bring in an investor later. But you're going to have an agreement with the investor once you know how to run that business, where you still get to make all of the decisions, because you'll know by that time what decisions you have to be in control of. And finally, here is some suggested reading. The More Than Just French Fries book is the one where I will send you the chapters if you fill out the eval form. So you don't have to buy that from Amazon. The other two are available from Amazon. These are both books. The E-Myth Revisited and Street Smart Franchising are books that several of my clients have read, have said it was very, very helpful to them in going through this process of trying to choose a business. So that's it. I have not seen any questions, but I am open to them because we have
so much rich
couple of minutes.
information, Heather. Thank you so
I know
much.
it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a whole lot. Actually, before I forget, can you go ahead and quickly pop in the chat your email address? We are recording this session, and so for those who aren't able to click on the link of the eval form, if you could put your email in there, and I will go ahead and verbally speak it out. So for people who are listening on the recorded session.
I can cut and paste this.
And in the meanwhile, if anyone has questions, I know there's just so much here. It's like, where do you start? But this has been tremendously helpful for those who are seriously considering this. So it's hrosen, ROSEN, at frannet.com, FRANNET.com. All right, any questions from folks?
I have a question for Heather going back earlier. Did you actually say, don't let emotions or a passion for something, for a product or service drive you to that franchise?
Yeah, it's not the place to start. You should start with when you buy something, a lot of buying decisions are made based on emotion. We all know this. I mean, this is why the commercials, the Super Bowl commercials, a lot of them were, tear jerkers, right? But it's not the place to start when you're hoping to start a business. You want to find a business that's going to take care of you, all of your needs, and support you. You're going to pick something, obviously, where you believe in the product or service, but that comes secondary after you figure out that all of your needs are going to be met in that business, and you're also qualified to run that business.
Okay. So if I got you right, your skill set, matching your skill set to that franchise is more important than what the franchise actually does.
The whole business model, your skill set, the lifestyle. When you get the slides, if you request the slides, you'll see a lot of the things that I talk to people about. How much money do you need to make? How quickly do you need to make it? Where do you want to be working? Which hours do you want to be working? How do you feel about employees? All of those things should be mapped out, listed before you choose a business first, and then try to find a product or service that you think you would be proud to represent and bring to your community.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? All right. Well, Heather, thank you so much for your time. I mean, you're obviously such a wealth of information, and I'm hopeful that other folks who are listening to this in the future will be able to glean some of those nuggets. I did want to also make sure that we wrap up here and let you guys know if you'd like to keep in touch with us. This is some of our social channels. We're on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. And also, if you want to keep in touch with us otherwise, send us an email at info@boomerworks.org. Here's places to contribute if you want to volunteer, and make sure to join our community on our boomerworks.org site in the upper right-hand corner. So with that, we are going to sign off here. Wish everybody a blessed night, and make sure also to join us in a couple of weeks on February 25th. We have our growth group, which is our peer networking roundtable to help you guys continue to grow your business. So thanks, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you again.